I just remember that play right when it started. We needed a stop in that play for sure, but like the moment the scheme broke out, you're like, oh, great call. That's gonna be a first down. And then within like a split second, it was, stopped. And it's like, that's just like a unique effort, not even like playing a great scheme or like being anticipatory as a coordinator, just someone just kind of saving your ass. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports. On today's episode, we're going to be breaking down Phil Parker and his Iowa defense. A defense that's ranked in the top 10 in points per game, yards per game, and interceptions for the last decade. A defense that doesn't recruit at an extremely high level, compared to Alabama and Clemson, but has still lived in the top 3 and top 5 in some seasons, and just been consistently really strong. So it's an exciting episode. You're going to break down the greatest plays from the last 10 years, the greatest players making those plays and play within the scheme, as well as look at the holistic approach that Iowa's taken to defense and why it operates the way it does.
Well, I think you need to give Kirk a lot of credit when it comes to developing this defense. I think when it comes to how practices are structured, we hit throughout the season. Tuesday, Wednesday, you hear from the players that they're going to go out and have full contact. That's really leaning into creating a physical defense. The offensive line does benefit from it, but your skilled players are walking away more banged up than they probably should be.
A lot of in-season injuries.
You think about Cooper getting injured before the Big Ten title game. That's not happening in a lot of programs. And I think what it is an eye towards is what are we trying to develop here, which is, professional football players. Mm-hmm. If you have to practice physicality at full speed, and that's the largest part of football is physicality.
Especially defense, too. You think of the secondary level players, safeties and corners that generally aren't great hitters on other teams. The holistic approach that Iowa has is that we're going to build these guys a little bigger. We're going to play them in zones. So they're not going to be running with receivers and not really turning their back to the quarterback and playing downhill. But also these guys have to be great tacklers. So the physicality part of it is definitely important. And I think also identifying physical players in the recruiting process to play those positions.
Well, and that's a large part of Phil's recruiting for DB is guys who typically played safety in high school that then get shifted to corner. You think about Ojemudia, Jamari. Desmond King isn't a true corner when he went and played slot in
safety.
NFL.
Yeah, safety in high school.
Cooper, played a little bit of both, but largely looked at it as a slot corner, slot safety. But all had success playing out wide in the system, and it's because they play backed up. And that really is the goal of Iowa football is to get these guys playing downhill and then being the more physical bunch. And that, again, that fits into who they recruit, who they value within their room. You can have guys who are technically more talented, maybe a little faster, a little bit better ball skills.
Yeah.
But if you are comfortable with putting your face through someone, two guys that come to mind for perfect Iowa recruits are
Jack Campbell
and Josie Jewell.
Yeah.
And it's guys who are weren't exactly the quickest guys, but when they came to making the play and
being physical. Yeah. And I think it comes down to your defensive line too. I think that's been the big transition since 2018, when this defense also added the cast position. Kelvin Bell coming in and really stepping up that defensive line recruiting. And then the way you could still produce a top 10 defense with your recruiting that you have is playing a lot of zone. Thus, you have an untraditional type of recruiting. You're not looking for the best athlete at all times. You have to have the vision of what the safety, this corner can look like, even though he's playing out of position in high school. So it allows you to recruit in a different sector in the recruiting process, which allows you to find your top 10 safety when other people don't evaluate him as a top 10 safety. Like Geno Stone was a 2-star recruit in Pennsylvania. I think he actually went to a Penn State camp, and they were like, he doesn't fit our valuation. But we look at him and we're like, we watched this film, and we knew he's going to be amazing when he was 17 years old. So it just changes how we can evaluate players differently.
Now I think we can break into what makes the Iowa defense great. And it really all starts with stopping the team's jab. So really the first step in making this Iowa defense successful is winning light box run attacks. Yeah. So this is when you have 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers in, 4 down linemen, 1 linebacker in the box against 6, 7, and 8 personnel for the offense. What this creates is on the interior you have double teams that then are essentially the point of attack for the offense. They're trying to move these D tackles out of their gaps. Occasionally you can have it at the ends, but most likely within Iowa's forefront is the 3 tech and 1 tech are trying to get moved vertically. Mm-hmm. So then you have 2 avenues of attack, and that really starts to break down our fills from a run defensive perspective. And if we can stop your inside zone and your outside zone, your read option through light boxes, that then is the next piece where then you have to start going elsewhere. You have to start going to the flats. You have to start using the passing game. And that's really where the pressure flips back onto the offense.
It doesn't make it a chess game at all. if you can't run against that, it's very simplistic. And I think the play I can call out right away is the Purdue, Iowa. I think it was 2019 because I think Epinez is the D end, and he plays a technique perfectly. His tackle goes back about 1.5 yards. And if you look at all 4 defensive linemen, I think they all win on the play. But they're down 6v8 in the box. There's no way it should be a negative 1 yard rush on the play. And then going into 2 Iowa State plays, I think why we felt so confident in 2013 or 2023, even when they were kind of coming back, was how well we played defense with light boxes against their run sets. Graves has an incredible win on one play where he just bench presses a guard and pushes him back 1 yard. And then I think there's another play with, I think, Black and Logan Lee that really control the play. And they're both, once again, light boxes versus more men for the offense, and they are 1 yard rushes and 2 yard rushes. So when you see that type of play, when you see 6 or 5.5 essentially players in the box and Iowa still holds it to 1 yard rush, that is exactly what this defense has been recruited to do, designed to do, and how it's been fundamentally developed on each of the players. So I think that's a really core element that doesn't seem like a big play during the game, but as a knowledgeable fan, you're really looking for that.
And it's really unique within college football to not let your defensive linemen make plays. So our philosophy, at least from our D tackles and D ends, is we don't want you playing upfield. We don't want you getting upfield. We want you to move down the line and essentially create a wall until we eventually force you to the sideline. And the best Iowa defensive plays that you'll see is when everyone's running horizontally and guys will fill in the gaps as it moves down the line. And eventually it becomes a phone booth at the sideline where you have safeties filling into small gaps and then they can make the plays. And that is the goal, is to not necessarily get negative plays where you think about Nebraska and Penn States of the world where they're trying to action stuff quick with 6 to 7 guys at the line fast and get negative plays and get off the field. Iowa is playing the patient long game where if we continue to play these reps over and over again, we believe in our ability to get off blocks and tackle and have strong personnel responsibility, which is a very difficult thing to develop, and why most teams don't like to go this way, because it's a lot of teaching. Zone is a ton of teaching, a lot of recognition. You can speed stuff up and just let athletes be athletes with man schemes, with blitz schemes. With zone, you're really requiring guys to think through alignments. Where do we have pressure? Who do I have to guard? Yep. And that is a difficult thing to do, but it really pays off. You see these senior-laden teams with Iowa with guys like a Seth Benson. He's not going to be an NFL linebacker, but he ends up being really effective because he can read and react at a really high level.
Exactly. And he plays the right way. He's going to play through blocks. He's not going to play around them. And I think that also brings us in our next topic, which is you're talking about attacking light boxes. That's probably the number one thing that coordinators want to do against us. But then attacking the flats is the next obvious answer when you look at the quarters alignment for Iowa. You have 2 deep safeties, a corner that's off 7 yards, and generally even your slots are 5 or 6 yards off the ball. That means the flats is wide open. Luckily, Iowa the last few years has Amani Hooker and Sebastian Castro. And I think the best play I've ever seen Sebastian Castro make was against Utah State. He had two, I think a tight end and a bigger receiver, double him on a bubble screen. He shoots below their legs and still makes the play. And then the entire 2023 Wisconsin game is just a Castro dominating the flats. They're trying to block him with true freshman tight ends in a scheme that doesn't. It should be fulfilling and getting 8 yards.
You're counting from with a block, and you have an athlete in space with a two-way go.
Exactly. So it's going to scramble the offensive coordinator's brains when you have a numbers advantage to the flats and you're not getting yardage. So I think that's the 2 big things. If we can stop just based on our technique and the player we have there to play physical enough, you can really dominate the offense really quickly, taking away their bread and butter.
And this is a really difficult thing for an O coordinator. Most O coordinators want to be aggressive. They see introductory plays as setup plays so that allows them to eventually have chunk plays. Most those O coordinators don't believe in themselves to go 10, 12 plays without getting a penalty, a holding call, or throwing a pick. So they want to play aggressively, and the system just really prevents that. And then when you do call your jabs, where you say, okay, I have my numbers advantage in the flats or on the interior, and it goes negatively, that insecurity just goes through the roof, and you're really trying to figure out how am I going to be successful.
Exactly. I think that one thing we would break into right now is those 2 things are obviously we do really well. We do well against light boxes. When we were light box, we stop the flats well, but the 4-3 substitution has been a pain point over the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, especially against the better teams. And what we mean by this is we're generally in a 4-2-5, but when you go 2 tight ends, we bring on a third linebacker and sub out our third safety, our cash position. And now we are more in a run-stopping formation. We have run-stopping personnel on. But teams will now throw against that. Knowing that we've added that third linebacker, they will be aggressive against that third linebacker. Put them in space, put them on the wide side of the field, and put generally their better athletes, either a tight end or a receiver, through some formational move where they can attack them. I think we'll showcase that through, Fisher being on Ibuka and against Ohio State. And that 2022 Michigan using Schoonmaker and Colston against Higgins in space. And even 2021 Penn State really putting our linebackers in a lot of pressure. It's clearly these like high-level offensive coordinators. I just listed the 3 best teams in the Big Ten over the last 5 years. Know how to trigger our 4-3, obviously through subs. It's not a crazy thing, but then how to attack it on a consistent basis.
It really just takes, when you have talent out wide and you can get a linebacker in the field in the slot, that's what really was Iowa's issue prior to developing the cash. You get back to 2014, was just an attack at that Leo linebacker over and over again. You think about Minnesota putting up 55 against us. It was all through jet motion to attack the flat, and that guy just wasn't athletic enough to make the play.
It makes us like throw back into our old system that wasn't meant for the modern football. But I think it's time to move on to anything else about 4-3 you want to bring up, or
no? I think the best rep to exemplify why you want to go 4-3 is Iowa State in 2021. Justin Jacobs. Mm-hmm. Justin Jacobs against the run was an incredible guy because he had the length to get off blocks. I think on the play, this is against the Breece Hall, Brock Purdy.
Game day, top 10 matchup at Iowa State.
And Chase Allen comes out and tries to hit an outside zone, zone step against Justin. Justin has just absolutely perfect technique, benches him off, shucks him down, and then forces the strip against Breece in the flats, and then Campbell ends up finishing up with a scoop and score.
Essentially wins the game.
But that really is, when we go 4-3, that's our idea. Is, okay, if you're going to heavy up against us, we're still going to have guys who can lock out and run. And Justin was that perfect example of why a 4-3 linebacker can be so important. Is
exactly
he has the physicality to get off that tight end block, and then the physicality to finish an NFL back in the flats.
Yeah, and you think of one program that's actually put us in 4-3 and ran against us is Minnesota, because they build their tight ends at 260 and their tackles at 330. Even when we heavy up, we're not heavy enough. And I just think back to all the sets they run where they get us in a 4-3 set. I'm like, we always dominate this. This is our physicality aspect. But they can still run the ball because they just have built their guys 50 pounds heavier than most programs have.
Yeah, I think we can move into goal line now. But there's 2 really important aspects of zone defense for short yardage. And I think one of them, you can cover the linebacker. So I want to cover about unaccounted for corners. So with Iowa recruiting and starting corners that are larger and slower, a lot of them, as we already talked about, move to safety in the NFL. The giant advantage of this is if you're not going to account for corners within your blocking scheme, and you're not going to count with them in the route, and you're going to let these guys play free. You can think back to Cooper in 2023 against Wisconsin on that huge 4th and 2 to open up the game. They assume he's not going to come fast up the edge because he's a corner. And then within most defensive schemes, most zone schemes, those guys, the reason they don't want to play him close to the line, they don't want to put a lot on him, is because they can't tackle. But why Iowa separated themselves as a zone scheme rather than being, I think back to like a Minnesota of this year, a Maryland, those really passive zone teams, it's because they don't have strong tackling corners. That's why they go to it. But then you meld it with having these safeties who can come off the edge. Think back to Jamari against Kentucky, against that edge play against him. Riley Moss in the bowl game against Michigan, playing that really strong off the block.
The number one play I think of is 2016 Desmond King versus Michigan. Most critical play of the game. I think it's the 3rd and short, and we have to hold him to a field goal to keep the game alive. And Desmond comes off the edge, unaccounted for, just how he broke it down, dips his left shoulder, gets around a block, and then makes the play. And it's complete anticipation. It's exactly what Phil's been allowing these guys to play with, and then they get older, as Desmond's senior year. And it just highlights exactly what you're talking about. Physical corner, unaccounted for. And they're like, what do you mean the corner came in and like played around our guard or our pulling tight end? Like that just
and didn't flinch too.
No,
just go straight through a guy. And
exactly.
That's just very rare for DBs.
Yeah.
And why Phil will lean on a 2-star or low 3-star corner is because they have that physical nature to them. And that really fits into this, whole quarters alignment style.
And it's Ojemudia.
It's just a beautiful thought. This guy is not going to be a liability out here. He's actually going to be a strength to our edge. And when we have guys like that, that's where this defense really comes into, its strongest point.
Yeah.
But now we can hop into linebacker play, and where are they really called upon to be the star of the play? And that is goal line.
Yeah.
Or short yardage.
Yeah. The first segment or verse sequence is definitely the Josie Jewell 4 straight stops against the Rutgers. And given the alignment of our goal line set, which you also run in short yards, we can be on our own 40-yard line, and if it's a 3rd and 1, we'll go into this heavy set where it's 6 defensive linemen and then 2 corners still on the field, but then the rest are linebackers. So it'd be like 3 linebackers you're playing, and the middle linebacker essentially has the responsibility of ball. Like that's their entire requirement. We're setting up the entire scheme, so you run free in the situation, and now it's your time to be an All-American. And luckily, Iowa's had Josie Jewell, Jack Campbell, and Jay Higgins in that standpoint where they can make plays now, and that's where you go from a good defense to a great defense if you can make a red zone stop, a 3rd and 1 stop in a critical moment. And the key play I always think about is we're playing McSorley and Saquon Barkley and Penn State at home in 2017. And it's a 3rd and 2 on our goal line, and it's a grinded out game. We need to hold them to field goals to win this. They have 300 more yards than us throughout the game.
I think it was 400.
400 more yards.
Yeah.
And we're still playing. We should have won the game. And they run an inside zone to Saquon Barkley. Everyone knows who that is. It's the scariest player in college football, even back then. And Josie understands that it's going to McSorley. He knows he's pulling it. And he just completely ignores the inside zone read. It's not his responsibility given the defense we're running. And he runs around the right C gap to his right and catches McSorley pulling it by himself and then celebrates like, I just made the play of the year. Because he did. It's one of those, we require middle linebackers to be great, and he was great on that play.
And I think that's really what separates, Jack Campbell.
Yeah.
He really had the speed to make the TFL plays within the middle linebacker at Iowa. I would put Josie as more of he was fantastic at knowing what gap the ball was going to, playing free, and then just guessing all the time. He just was a great guesser. Mm-hmm. Higgins was more of, I'm going to be the extra man. I'll be late to something. I'm going to read and react. And then if I get to a hole with you, I'm 100 for 100. Yeah. I don't know if he missed a head-up tackle all year. That skill set is super redeemable at middle linebacker. Why he had such gaudy numbers for 2 years is because he was just, if it was a hole for a hole, he's going to make the play. Mm-hmm. Jack Campbell was kind of the exception to both. And you can highlight, the first time he made a splash play was in 2020 against Wisconsin. We were short yardage, and they were in Wildcat with Groshek, or however you say his name.
Yeah, Groshek.
And they run a quick outside zone scheme, and a gap opens up for Campbell to shoot through. And, some linebackers can make this shoot through if you have the pace and speed of it. Josie wasn't fantastic at it because he wasn't that great of a runner, but Campbell has such crazy acceleration that when he decided to commit, when you're watching that live, it was like, holy cow,
it's over.
A speeding bullet. It's probably my favorite middle linebacker play of the last decade, just because it demonstrates why he ended up being a first rounder one day. It's like at 6'5", running like that and then finishing the play is just fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I actually want to talk about we missed was Geno Stone alley runs. Mm-hmm. So within attacking the flat, you have these bubble plays where you can count for guys with blockers. I think in this particular one, Michigan on a 3rd and 10 ran essentially like a bubble screen where you're getting guys on the edge with blockers. The only unaccounted for guy on that side was Geno Stone, so he had to go make the play. If he slow plays it and the running back gets to use his blockers and essentially play a two-way go on either side, be intelligent with how he runs, you're in a lot of trouble, and that might go for a first down. With guys like Geno, where they can just smell an angle. Mm-hmm. And there's something to that within football where they're essentially spatial geniuses. And I would put Geno Stone in that realm of, he's 5'9", 205, but he's one of the best football players in the world for this reason, because he's spatially a genius. Mm-hmm. And that this perfectly demonstrates the closing speed, when to break down, trust in your eyes, and then the ability to finish. And it's one of the top plays of the Phil Parker era. Yeah. Just time and moment, and it was just really special.
I just remember that play right when it started. We needed a stop in that play for sure, but like the moment the scheme broke out, you're like, great call.
Great call. Yeah.
That's going to be a first down. And then within like a split second, it was, stopped. And it's like that's just like a unique effort, not even like playing a great scheme or like being anticipatory as a coordinator, just someone just kind of saving your ass.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's time to break into the pass game.
Yeah.
So we already broke down that quarters is our general set, but I think my favorite play from our corners, essentially, when you're defending one quarter of the field, is when we can allow those players to play aggressive. And we have them at 4 or 5 yards, but they have the entire quarter of the field to defend in a one-on-one situation. And the two best players at that were definitely Desmond King and Riley Moss of all corners. Just having a tight alignment, but then playing their technique perfectly at the top of the route and never losing their technique. And you can think of Desmond King's pick against Pittsburgh in 2015, and I think Riley Moss's first pick ever in 2017 or 18.
2018 against
2018
Minnesota.
against Minnesota. His first pick of his career came in a perfectly repped, crouch corner. You're showing them a deep route. You're like giving them the option to throw deep against somebody that's only 5 yards out the ball, and flips his hips perfectly, runs with them, and then high points it. And it's the reason why he got on the field as a true freshman, why he's in the NFL, is that to do that as a true freshman is just insane. So I think that's like the first element of quarters defense, is trusting your corners to play even closer.
That is an invitation in itself when you're in quarters. Is he doesn't have help over the top of him on the outside. Mm-hmm. So then if you can play it tight, that's really where that almost becomes like a man rep, but it's played a little bit differently in just how you flip your hips and you get your eyes back to the ball. The other option you have for corners in that set is a squat corner, or you call a cloud corner.
Yep.
And the guy who played this the best over his career, especially coming into his senior year, was Michael Ojemudia. And I think why he ended up being drafted, I think it was in the 3rd round, is because he was so exceptional at this technique. Mm-hmm. And how this plays out is you have a safety that's helping you over the top. So it kind of plays like half the field is Tampa 2. Mm-hmm. You have a corner sitting on the shallow side. He has first flat responsibility, but what he really wants to do is play a high-low game with the QB. And
usually the short side of the field.
Usually short side of the field is how you action this, because then the safety can use the sideline for his defense as well. But Adrian Martinez gets hook, line, and sinkered on this, where you have Michael at the snap faces to the QB, and why you call it squat corner is they squat down, essentially playing that I'm going to be playing to the flats here. You can now throw this pocket shot behind me. Mm-hmm. That is really where QBs love to make it, because it's only about a 10 to 12 yard throw, but it could be for a touchdown if you hit it correctly. Mm-hmm. What Ojemudia did so well is give that squat technique under the guys that he knows he's going to play this pop shot. Mm-hmm. And he does it against Martinez for a pick. I think he also does it against, is it Illinois as well?
Yeah.
He hits one. But it really shows what senior corners who have been in the system for a long time, understanding what the responsibilities, eventually they can play the influence game in college football, which you don't really get to do that often within man schemes or other typical college football. It's, did I dominate the rep and now I'm in place to make the pick? This one is really just a mental game, and he did 100%. It better than anyone.
Yeah. I think the other coverage that we see get a lot of picks from is the slot corner or the weak side linebacker. They have that hook zone that has 3 different responsibilities, but I think the play that always jumps out to me, and it's a current player for this year, is Cohen Entringer. And their responsibility is to cover the seam instantly and then stop the curl or inside deep in. And against Michigan State, he instantly presses the seam, gets hands on the receiver, and then realizes he has no work to do. And that's kind of the core concept of like zone defense, is if you drop into your zone and don't have a match concept where you're required to guard somebody for more than your next 2 steps, you need to go find your next responsibility. And you have your eyes back as well. And so he presses that seam and then realizes, now I have no responsibility. And to do this at a young age, as a junior, to then kind of feel that in route coming behind him and then intercept it, is just exactly how we want that kind of slot corner to be playing quarters defense, throughout every snap. And I think the Dane Belton, he had a few of those, but I think the one against Illinois is a great concept as well. Is he has a out route stick right in front of him. He understands I have help outside. I'm pretty sure it's a squat corner from Jamari on that side of the field. Understands I shouldn't go with that. Doesn't even take a negative step. And they can feel the in route in the same exact kind of play where he can drop back and then make a play as well. And it just kind of reflects on how these slot corners have to play. You have to really understand, where's my help? What's my responsibility? And then you doing refreshes of, do I have a responsibility in the moment of this play after 2 seconds and 4 seconds? I should always be finding work. I should always be finding coverages, and it's just a really advanced way to play zone defense.
Well, and that's how you get these corners to eventually play such good football, is you have repetitions upon repetitions, and they start seeing the same route concepts used against them. So when you start to get that pattern recognition down as a junior and senior, that's where you see these guys really take a leap, and they have a belief in themselves that they're reading something correctly. And that's why you have, Jamari have a litany of picks as his senior years. He could guess, and he believes in himself. And that's really where Phil doesn't allow a lot of guys to play outside the system to guess. You can think about Riley Moss, that guess in that quarters look against Indiana. against Penix when there was that 1st and 10, they were down 17, they went to the out route. That's really not Riley Moss's responsibility to go jump that route. They want him to tackle and, continue the play, but he gets, a spidey sense about it, and he goes, I'm going to try and action something, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, you think back to what happened with Castro against Iowa State.
Exactly.
So it's a thing you want to let develop within your DBs, especially as they get older, but you also have to caution against it, and it's a very difficult thing to manage.
Yeah.
I think another thing we talk about, so we talk about quarters. The alteration to quarters is cover 3. And you can get to cover 3, a bunch of different ways. We talked about, cover 6 and cloud corners where you can essentially roll the safety's responsibilities, and they're tied in with the corners where they can roll to 3 high in various different ways. You can buzz safeties down to where linebackers are playing at, in the hook zone over the middle. But how cover 3 is primarily attacked is in the flats, playing high-lows with what would be considered those curl slot defenders with your cash and your outside linebacker, and then it's played up the seams. And you can think about Utah State was a great seam shot team in the opening. That's how you attack cover 3s. It'd be hyper aggressive against it, but it can be really effective. But when you have really talented guys in that free safety spot, in this instance, it was X against Utah State where we ran a reverse, roll
where he's strong safety but dropping
where
in the middle
X
third.
actually ended up playing the middle third. And they tried to hit the seam shot, but it was a touch late, and X has that great layout play. And that's where that really demonstrates, even when you are attacking the correct part of his zone, if a guy's playing fast enough and is quick enough to the spot and the throw is just barely off, he's going to have eyes on the ball. And I think that's why you see such high numbers of interceptions within this offensive scheme, is that the bad balls or the late throws by QBs are punished. Within man-to-man, if a guy doesn't have his eyes back to the QB and a QB leaves the ball 2 yards inside, he's not going to have an opportunity at that pick. But if you throw a sailing pass against Iowa State, if you throw a ball that gets tipped, if you throw a ball that's not on time and on target, then it opens up the ability for Iowa to step in and make that pick. And that's why I think you continue to see Iowa have such strong turnover numbers, is for that, that really well-taught zone defense.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to break down about zone defense before we break into man?
I think we can talk about linebacker play. So this is more of why this works well for our linebackers. Iowa doesn't really build, sideline to sideline guys. Obviously, you would put Campbell in that group. But Josie and Higgins had a ton of success within this scheme, and why they're not looked upon as like surefire NFL guys is because they're not low 4.6, 4.5 run movers.
Yeah.
But within zone, that allows those guys to play in the middle of the field. They're not chasing running backs to the flats. They're not in man-to-man getting isolated where a running back or a slot receiver's got a two-way go on them. It allows them to be what they're good at, which is, being tough guys in the middle. And I think that is like the last aspect of this is when you have really good pass defending linebackers. I think you can put Seth Benson's probably my number one.
Yeah.
The amount of times where he could smell a stick route or an out route coming at him, and he could take the correct angle and be quick enough. That kind of highlights how important that weak side linebacker is in that pass defense. That guy's got to be a really good mover now, because as you mentioned, he plays a very similar role,
identical role
to that cash guy. And why you've seen them lighten up to a lot of 6'1" guys who can really move is because he's got a lot of space to cover, and he's got to be a really smart guy.
Even though he's on the weak side of formation, he still has the same responsibilities. He's got to protect the seam, and then he's got to protect the curl and deep in. And so he's still got to, and then he's got to protect the flats if there's somehow a third concept over there. So it's the same progression, and you're 230 pounds.
Actually, the last thing I want to bring up on zone is the expansion and contraction of these zone defenses. So what we've seen really high level, I think about Cooper and Castro mainly, is when you think about 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 looks where they're going to try and attack at the first down line in a pass. We'll have guys get immediate depth, identify where they're being attacked, and it's always within zones concepts. Your flat, your last read, usually your third read, is something to the flats. It's a leak out route to a running back. When this starts working super effective is we take that original drop, we realize we have it covered, and then we start to play forward before the QB even comes down to his check down. And you'll see this happen, in a multiple of games where Castro will already start be running to the flats, and a QB hasn't even turned his head yet. And as he does, Castro's there to make the play. And that's, again, this element of continuing to learn the defense. Where are they attacking us? Where's my next step at? Where's my next move? And that's like the last aspect. When you see Iowa start to crack down on, leak out routes to running backs, that's where we're really playing well right now.
Exactly. even though we're running zone primarily on first and second down, if we do get into third and long, we'll generally go man too high. That's where Phil loves to live. And it's usually inside leverage, man too high. So you're pressing everything to the sideline. I think this is best exemplified by Desmond King in 2015. Obviously won the Thorpe Award, and we'd move him into the slot corner on 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 5 and longer in these man too high looks. And against Iowa State, he sets up perfectly to win the game. He has a inside leverage, forces the receiver to, based on his alignment, to run an out route, and then undercuts the out route. So it just shows, I understand what my alignment is showing you, and I'm so confident you're going to run an out route here. I'm actually running the route for you. And he does the exact same thing in Northwestern. Same alignment, inside leverage, forces the out route based on his alignment, and then undercuts it and makes a play. And it just shows how well Phil explains the scheme to them, what their responsibility is, and then how you're going to be attacked, is that you're having guys guess that out route and make plays only on, not they're great athletes, but they're also anticipation towards what is going to be run against them.
And that's what too high allows. There's, two schools of thought. You have, zero blitzes where you send 6 and you have 5 guys to cover. That's where you're just trying to get the ball out quick. Iowa will occasionally action that. But what we really like is too high looks with that inside leverage, as you mentioned. But what that protection of those too high safeties does is allows guys to play underneath routes. Jamari Harris against Washington this year had just an unbelievable route where he, collisions Boston at 10, can feel that Boston kind of leaning to the out route. And because he's got high safeties, he's okay with, a combo route up the side. He's okay with an up and out and up because he's got protection there, and a safety can come make a play on it if the QB's focused on him.
Yep.
Another aspect of this, it's out of actually a zone look, but it's such a perfect play by Castro. It follows kind of similar principles where against Iowa State, they're in a 5-wide look with a running back as their third receiver on the left side. Iowa is rolling or running a buzz cover 3 where now Castro has outside curl pressure, but he's aligned at like 7 or 8. And Beck from alignment sees a corner at 10, Castro at 8 with, basically a 2-man game out wide. And the minute that the ball is snapped, Castro's moving to that out route with impunity, and the route just so poorly ran by this running back. He can't create enough vertical pressure through his speed and fluidity that Castro now can play quickly to press outside and wide, and that leads to a pick 6. And I think that's another demonstration of a guy seeing pre-snap. This is the space they're looking at. The QB, Beck kind of takes a look at it, and he also knows this running back's not creating enough vertical pressure for me to be worried about a seam shot. I'm going to be sitting on this out route. Yeah. And that is just a lot of thinking. And again,
I guess the way you said it right, just sitting. Having the concept of how to sit on stuff based on the offensive alignment, based on what you've seen on film. Can you have that kind of guessing mind before the play starts? Because if you don't have it in mind of what's being attacked, how you're going to be attacked, it's really hard to play zone defense because you're more like in a unconfident read and react situation where it's really hard to make plays. But as you have more reps, as you grow as a player, you have to then have this kind of understanding of how you're going to be attacked. Then you're going to have those anticipation guesses that are really the critical part of zone defense. If you're not guessing, you're not playing. Yeah. But if you're guessing, you're going to also beat deep as well. So it's almost, double-edged sword where you see Wampa this year against Iowa State and Castro against Iowa State both, get baited into jumping routes they thought were going to be picks, and then they were the 2 biggest plays of the game. Wampa gets beat for 70 yards on an out and up through the slot, and then same thing for Castro, out and up on the man-to-man too high that leads to their game-winning field goal. So it's this weird relationship you have as a secondary player at Iowa where you really have to guess to make plays, but also turn that portion of your brain off sometimes to just play the scheme. And it's this fine line that really DBs have to go through at Iowa.
Yeah, and I think a perfect example of the opposite of a guess, but allowing zone defense to work for you is the Deshaun Lee against Wisconsin. So this is a play where they have 2 receivers to the right, and they're running an arching hook that's getting in front of the safety, and Deshaun Lee is the left corner, that is unaccounted for. They don't try and run him off. They don't try and run a deep out to his side to, essentially eat him up. So then he can float. And Wolf is expecting, not Wolf, but what's his name? whatever. The Wisconsin QB is expecting where his eyes are at is, okay, if this safety is going to stay deep on me, we can hit this underneath crossing route with pace. And then Deshaun Lee just comes out of nowhere because you expect him to keep on playing his quarters defense or his third length, but you just didn't take him away.
Yeah,
and that's
it's
really
finding work. It's that it's that ability to understand I have no responsibility right now. I should be looking for the next play. I should be looking for that next receiver that's encroaching, that is attacking, not even attacking me.
But if you can get 7 defenders on the back end thinking that way and becoming this amoeba hive mind where it's like, when am I the extra guy? When is it my turn to make the play? That's where you don't necessarily have to guess. You just have to let Phil call an aggressive set, and he'll eventually get you in a spot where he can get a pick. Exactly. That's really the balancing. It's like you want guys guessing, you want guys playing the front foot, because when you go play Penn State and Oregon, if you're not playing aggressive, you're going to give up yards the entire game.
Exactly.
So that's the balancing that we're talking about.
I think the last portion of pass defense too is just the pass rush and how that plays into defending essentially anything that's in front of the linebackers and then in the middle of the zone as well, behind our middle linebacker. And something Iowa didn't have last year. They weren't able to generate pressure from their D tackles and bull rushes and kind of close that pocket in where you didn't have that pressure. That layered throws become a lot more difficult. You think of against, I think it's Purdue as an overthrow in 2022 with O'Connell at Purdue. And it's just a classic, I let a ball sail, and they're in a quarters or cover 3 look in the middle safety. Merriweather makes the play. And it really is the last aspect of this pass defense is pass rush and the bull rush that they can employ to, all right, we already have all these guys thinking very critically out here and making these smart decisions about, where I expect to be attacked. If you can also have the D-line cause these quarterbacks to be sped up, not to have clean lines of sight, and maybe even tip a ball once in a while, then you still have 22 eyes back at these moments to make these plays. And I think it's even a half the picks are even still just that. The D-line pressure just causes the quarterback to be sped up just enough or miss a throw where, I'm in my pedal and I have eyes on the QB. I can now make a play that I shouldn't be able to make.
Well, that's really the key aspect of that timing we're talking about on the back end is you have to match that with the timing of the D-line. And when you have a really strong D-line, the secondary can get more guessy because they know the ball's got to be out in 4 to 5 seconds at most.
Exactly.
I think another part we can talk about too is how do we action, pass rush against teams in, zone concepts and man concepts. You obviously have blitz packages, but we've talked about this before. With how Iowa lines, with off coverage at the slot corner, and you don't really want to run a lot of like double A mug is what you call it, where you have 2 linebackers lined up over the center. You can bring these exotic 6-man pressures. That does limit your ability to blitz the passer at the snap of the ball. But how Iowa likes to do it, and it's a great example of it, is at Penn State in 2020 playing Clifford, is pre-snap, Clifford sees 4 Iowa defenders to the left he's got only 2 receivers and a running back that can technically add to it. But at the snap, he knows that he's down numbers to the wide side of the field. Essentially what that tells him, like my gamesmanship of whatever route concepts I'm going to run, they're going to have a man extra for that, and it's going to really take a special throw to get to it. That means I should be coming backside to the short side of the field where it's a 2v2 right now. What that does then at the snap is Clifford's eyes are going to go to the right away because that's where he's going to play his quick 2.5, 3 second game. What Iowa likes to combo with that is then a front side blitz from our slot corner and our linebacker, and then we'll drop that short side of the field D end. So now we gain numbers. Now it's a 3-on-2 on where you're looking, so it's going to slow down the ball coming out. And by the time you react to pressure, even though it's going to come late, and it's going to be, it really might not even end up in a sack. Most likely it's not going to end up in a sack. It's going to speed up your operation. You're either going to hold on to the ball and panic, or you're going to throw a questionable ball. And that's really just such brilliant defense.
It's actually, we saw 2024 Minnesota run a lot of that. Like when you were breaking down Minnesota for the first 3 games before we played them, they ran that exact same set at least 3 times a game. And we were like, Cade's going to have to throw into the blitz because that's actually where you've gained numbers. Pre-snap, you don't have numbers. You are not supposed to throw to that side of the field. You're supposed to throw to the weak side or wherever your numbers or advantage are. But then when that DN drops, technically it flips. So it's just brilliant. Like pre-snap, I know where I'm going. And then post-snap, you got to go like, oh, I got to hesitate. And now I got pressure on me where I'm going back to my second read. And it's just a really beautiful scheme. I don't know if we stole that or they stole it, but it's definitely something I just remember that Strigo was always in.
Well, I think
coverage.
It's when you're playing quarters looks, that's kind of how you have to action stuff. And you know where the QB's mind's going to be at pre-snap. And that's what's just so fun about football is just a chess match between the QB and the defensive coordinator. It's like, where can I get you looking pre-snap that you think you have something good, and then can I flip it on its head?
Yeah.
I think Iowa does. Iowa doesn't do that as much as, I think about like Penn State, who believes in all 11 guys in heads-up scenarios where you can be hyper-aggressive and then very passive. And, Penn State's done an unbelievable job of that, but that's also personnel-based. As you have 11 pros, 6 of them are going to be in the top 3 rounds.
Yeah.
With Iowa's scheme, you kind of have to play passive alignment and just play tough man football. And that's really where it's like, it's special that we've gotten to this point where you still have these very talented, low points per game defenses, but you're not really doing it with, all-stars.
Yeah. I think time to break into a discussion about what we expect for this year.
Yeah.
2025 and the personnel. You look at certain rooms, and I think if you look back, it's like, well, man, the DN run we had in Nelson, Golston, Epineza, Van Ness, Van Valkenburg, like, can we repeat that this year? Can we have Llewellyn, Herkett, and then Brian Allen and all the guys, Joseph Anderson, Merriweather, climb to that level of going from solid players to now being second contract players in the NFL? Because 4 of those guys are, and that's what you really need. I look at this 25 bunch, and it's the D line needs to go back to being a dominant force, and the run game and the pass game, because that's where this entire scheme breaks out into is, can we win light boxes in the run game? Can we get pressure with 4 in the passing game? If we can't do that, now we are in the chess match where we're on the back foot, we're putting 8 men in the box, we're not playing the scheme we want, we're playing too close to the line so people can get behind us, and we don't have the opportunity to counter in cute ways from light to heavy the way we want to. So it really comes down to that. Those 4 guys up front need to be back to that top 5 unit that they were from 2019 to 2023. And
it's all about,
that seems like the core piece.
Yeah, it's all about having depth too. I think with how Iowa likes to back up, and you're really putting a lot of reps on these defensive linemen's legs, and you're allowing them to be double teamed, ad nauseum, which is it's such a physically draining thing to have to hold off 2 guys. So that's where depth is such a key piece for this defense, and why I have such trust in this year's defense is just because of those 2 additions on the D tackle. Like, Pace is not going to be a gigantic guy that goes out and plugs up double teams and dominates from like a Davion Nixon perspective, but he's a full-grown man who's
6 year,
understands his technique, understands what he's going to be asked to do, and then you combo that with Hawthorne, who's a really athletic guy who can be really effective in that 3 technique pass rush we talk about all the time, as being how Phil has really evolved our zone rush is through that 3 technique who's manned up on a guard. And I think why you just like that attack more often is because that pressure is directly in the QB's vision. There can be times where a QB has pressure that's imminent outside of him from an outside rush,
aware of it,
but he's not aware of it, so it's not speeding up his timing. Although you might eventually make the big strip sack like against Llewellyn had against Raiola, and that's really how you break games open is through that rush. Interior pressure is just such a gigantic part of this zone defense because we're so weak in the interior with our linebackers in zone, and really what we're trying to create through this interior pressure is the overthrow, is the guys in their face that allow our linebackers to be more effective in pass defense. So that's why I think that the 3D tackles, having 3 guys you
Pittman
can go
too.
to.
I have to say 4 because I think he's so been in this position for so long. He's been the backup D tackle role since 2023. That usually turns out. Those guys, generally seniors, become playable, even if they're not playing more than 8 snaps a game, 12 snaps a game. He has to be an aspect of it. You need that 4D tackle rotation to allow Graves and Hawthorne and Pace to make big-time plays and to feel more like they have, I got 40 plays this game, not 65. And it's such an important aspect. I think Pittman is really important player to get to a playable status where you're not really running that 3-man rotation, it's a 4-man rotation.
Well, and that's where Graves is going to be his best. If Graves can play rested, he's the most dominant D-tack we've had. I don't think anyone's, maybe Carl Klug.
Yeah. And I go into it for the DN too. I think for, Merriweather as a player that we really liked in the 2023 class, and we haven't really seen against Northwestern. I think he had a sack in garbage time. But another key aspect to keep Llewellyn and Herkett fresh is to develop DN depth that you can truly sub for an entire possession, not just like 2 plays and then they're not repping it perfectly. So if you get Brian Allen and Merriweather playing honorable mention football, where you're going to be a good player, maybe a second-team All-Big Ten player next year, but we feel like we can put you on the field for 30 plays, that is so drastic to allowing this D-line to have that true depth it does have. You have a lot of upperclassmen, well-recruited, high expectation players, but we can't be down doing this 6-man rotation, maybe 2.5 D tackles, 3.5 D tackles. You really need that 4 DNs, 4 D tackles, split 2/3, 1/3 type snaps, and that's where this defense can change very quickly because now coordinators aren't going, if we drop back on 1st and 10, we're going to have a 15-yard in route that's going to be a clean pocket, and it's going to be there. And I think that's the key play.
Well, I think you really don't want to put these games on the DBs either.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we got a little comfortable with in like 2021, 2022 was being able to roll the cover 3, press your corners with Moss and DeJean and Jamari, and you could run a heavy 8-man box against the run and essentially give up. You would give up occasionally like a 10-yard curl, and Jamari would occasionally get beat, but you really could shut down the run just because you could add numbers to the box and make teams have to throw against you. That you're not going to want to put TJ Hall and Deshaun Lee or Barrows on an island for against a lot of these teams. That you're going to have to protect them with alignment, go to more 4 high looks, allow for those cloud rotations, and be a little more gamesmanship out wide. And that's going to have to be, again, then you're putting a ton on that front 6, on that front 7 to hold up in the run game and in the short passing game.
Yep.
And that's where you can lay out a pretty successful season just because that D line is ready to go. It's got depth, it's got talent. And that's where it's going to be actioned.
I feel fine about the rest. I love the safeties.
Yeah,
Wappa,
safeties are awesome.
Lutmer, and Entringer are probably you think of the 3 best safeties, probably the best safety crew we've had since when it was Amani and Gino in terms of like guys I had a lot of expectations for. They're all upperclassmen now and all playing at the same time. I don't see any concern about that unit at all. I think it's actually made a step up where it's like this is the top 5 unit in the country, top 10 unit in the country. Linebacker, once again, Harrell and Shire have been waiting in the wings. They're 6-year players. I think Harrell's a 6th year, I want to say.
Might be 5th. I think both are 5th years.
Maybe 5th years, yeah. But once again, they were well recruited. They've been sitting in the wings for a long time, been trained on exactly how to play this defense. I have expectations they'll be solid. I think Shire has a good chance of playing the NFL, given our recruiting love for him. And so, I feel good about the middle of the field. As long as we can generate 4-man pressure, I think this defense can regain its status as the defense that we saw in 2022 and 2023. It's just all about not allowing an offense coordinator to feel very comfortable with essentially any part of his playbook. It's like we're running for 7 yards and we're throwing with no pressure. When that happens, screen game comes into play, deep play action, 1st and 10 drop action with long developing routes comes into play. Essentially, these guys can get really creative, and we play a very strong schedule with a lot of talent. You could see another season where you're getting up multiple 400-yard games unless that D-line is dominant.
Yeah, that's really the key aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because you're not I like the back 7. They're old guys that are going to play a position. You're not going to have communication issues, but they're not a ton of playmakers back there.
I think the safeties could be.
I think, I agree with the safeties, but corner, TJ Hall, he should develop into what we just discussed.
Yeah.
The pattern recognition should be there. The trust in himself should be there. He has all the physical tools. He's fast, long, can jump.
He's the best guy in the room now, too.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. It's always important for corner to be the best guy.
But you're gonna have to match that with someone on the opposite side, and that's a big question mark right now.
Yeah.
I would not feel comfortable with what we talked about, physicality in the flats, getting off blocks. Lee has just not risen to that level of being a great flat defender. And if you're going to have to protect him through off coverage and 4 high looks, he's got to be a hell of a guy in the flats to make up for that, and that just hasn't come to fruition. So I think they'll likely go to someone.
You have options.
You have options, and the transfer from South Dakota, I think, is going to be the guy.
But you still have Godfrey and you have Moda.
Yeah.
2 guys that really fit. If we want to talk about physical, safety-built corners, you really are in the situation where last year where you're like, we have to go to Nestor now, who should be playing safety.
Or Watson.
Or Watson. We actually now have 2 other bodies. Godfrey's now a sophomore, and Moda's a junior. Those guys are built the right way. As long as you can teach them the correct technique, they're going to be able to stop the flats. They're 6'1" safeties that are out there at 190. They're big enough. So I I think we have enough bodies where it'll be a competitive room for that second cornerback. And It just depends if someone can play with enough confidence to make a difference out there rather than just kind of survive.
And I think they're going to get a lot more help from the offense this year when it comes to field position, not having to play so many snaps. I think Iowa's going to be able to break into a very strong ball control team this year with our run game.
Yeah.
And that's going to really speed up, how many snaps they're going to have to play, how much energy they can expand. And then hopefully we get a better production from our punter. Punter ends up being such a large part of the defense. If you can get guys backed up and letting Phil play aggressive, essentially in the reverse red zone, that's a huge piece of how he likes to play.
Yeah. What is your final expectations, just to put a bow on this episode? How do you see the stats dropping out, given how hard the schedule is, given how the schemes have improved pretty much in every single program that we'll be playing?
I mean, my way to success is dominant play from Aaron Graves. I think you have to have him be like a first-team All-American, second-team All-American. A guy you're comfortable only have to play 60, 70%. We just talked about that D tackle depth. If you can keep him fresh and let just him be that demon of inside zone and pass rush where he can be both.
Yeah.
That's where this defense grows into a top 10 unit. If Pace and Hawthorne and Pittman can't pick up the slack where they're being consistently beat on the interior, and we talk about that next evolution, that next chess piece breaking out or chess move breaking out, I think you're going to be a very good red zone defense because of your seniority. It's all seniors on the D-line and linebacker and live upperclassmen and the safety, so you're not going to have communication issues. But that's going to hurt you from a perspective of field position and rhythm on offense if you're consistently giving up 300, 400-yard days and not getting out the field. So I think...
Yeah, I live in the same camp. I think it's the D-line has to be special, and I mentioned the depth has to be good, but then that depth allows Herkett, Llewellyn, and Graves, guys we've really leaned on these last few years to go from really solid players. Graves, I think, has the highest ceiling of them. Even I think Llewellyn might be close too, but those guys stepping up into being all Big Ten players, given that they get to play 50 snaps.
And they're all great run defenders, and they all play hard. So
they play technique, they play hard, and they're solid.
I think also what hurt the team last year was leadership issues. Obviously, you had Castro sitting down when he was cleared to play. You had Cade quitting the team.
Yeah.
You had Jamari taking games off. I think there was a care problem at the end of that season.
Yeah.
Which is what Iowa requires over anything is care and will.
Exactly.
They're
you
trying
have
to
senior leaders stepping out of games. That's tough.
Well, I don't think have we talked about physicality yet? As like biggest hits.
No.
We should probably talk about that.
I think we broke it down through the flat plays. I think that's
True.
it. And then like the D line holding up and all that stuff. In the end, we started out saying this has been a top 10 defense for the last decade. And there's a lot of concern going into this year given the turnover at linebacker, the insecurity about corner position. Do we have that dominant D end that's going to get us 10 plus sacks and be an all Big Ten D end? There should be also some credence given to Phil and the production he's had over his last 10 years. And I think that's where, think about the development these guys have gone through. Think that they're actually a very old defense. That's not COVID old. There's not 6 years everywhere, but these guys are all juniors at minimum. I don't think we'll see a kid under his third year in the program. So Iowa's where they want to be. They're playing, if we think about it as like a development program, they're 3 years in. They've been recruited the scheme correctly. A lot of these guys we really loved in the recruiting process. And now it's time to kind of come to fruition and develop a top 5, top 10 defense again through a really tough schedule.
Excited for it.
Yeah.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.